I think what I love the most about astrology is its incredible ability to allow us to identify moments in time when patterns of potential come to life for us. And this is how we can prognosticate or make predictions or projections into the future about what might occur in our life, what might be happening. And that is the magic of astrology. That's so much of its beauty. Yes, it has other elements, other components. It can be an amazing tool into our psyche, our character potential, our soul's development. It can give us so much information about our potential in this lifetime. But I do have an incredible love for and appreciation of astrology's strength as a predictive tool. And there are many predictive methods, but in today's presentation, we are going to focus on secondary progressions. Secondary progressions are a little different than transits. You might be familiar with transits because transits are planets in the sky at any moment in time. And, this book called An Ephemeris will tell you where the planets are at any moment in time and how those planets are connecting to your birth chart. So that is a transit. Planet in the sky, how it's connected to your birth chart, and what that's waking up in terms of potential for you, life events, all of that. And that's a real visceral type of predictive astrology, right? Because the planets are out there, they're real, and they are making contact with your actual birth chart. Secondary progressions are quite different. Secondary progressions represent our internal readiness to have a very specific life experience. And when you understand that internal readiness, that moment in time when that's going to be triggered, and then you combine it with another method like transits or solar arc directions, or all three, which is my preferred choice of predictive astrology, then you will be able to really start to become graceful, lyrical, accurate, and just profoundly insightful for yourself and others in terms of your predictive analysis. So get comfortable. This video is going to take a while, and I'm going to take you on a tour in this video of some of my most defining life moments in terms of the secondary progressions and how they came alive. And I will be showing my charts and sharing my screen in a minute. Before I do that, hello there, a big warm welcome. If you happen to be new to my channel, my name is Maria Di Simone. I am a professional astrologer, and I'm so excited to have you here. I hope you stick around. I hope you decide to like the channel and subscribe and, like the videos, share, comment, all of that. If you are here and returning, you know how much I value you as a part of my astrology family. So thank you for spending time with me today in this video. And what inspired this video is I was looking at some of the archives that I have on the topic of secondary progressions, and I realized that some of those videos are really old. So I wanted to do a little refresh in terms of my content. And I was watching one video that was, over 2 years old, and I said, this would be a good time to refresh the content of secondary progressions. And it's very timely because I actually have registration open right now for my secondary progressions class. And so I'm going to actually say that this video is being filmed in November of 2024. So depending on when you watch it, I may or may not have registration open for a secondary progressions class. I do have an entire astrology school on my website, teaching classes from the beginner's level all the way through advanced classes. But a class like secondary progressions, I usually offer it once every 8 to 10 months, depending on the flow of my curriculum, because this is more of an intermediate to advanced topic of astrology. You can't learn predictive astrology until you have become very comfortable with natal analysis and that branch of astrology. So the secondary progressions class is open now for registration. And this class, I am going to share my screen actually and show you my website very quickly. And this is, my website is about to get completely revised. So what if you're looking at this 6 or 7 months from now, you're going to see a very different website. But as of today, this is the website. So I want to highlight the secondary progressions class. And I want you to understand what you're going to be learning in this class. So first of all, you must be proficient already as an astrology student to the level of aspect analysis. And also, you must have studied transits and be familiar with transits. And if you are, then this class is for you. And you are going to be able to learn how to track your birth chart moving forward in time and what this means as far as your internal soul development. And then prepare to be amazed when you discover how these internal shifts connect with transits to produce your external life experiences. And major life events such as a marriage, divorce, birth of a child, career milestone, or even a geographic relocation will not happen unless it is reflected in your progressed horoscope and triggered by transiting planets. That's a big statement, but guess what? In today's presentation, I'm going to prove that to you with my examples. And in this class, in just 4 weeks, you will learn the tools of the trade to understand how you can implement progressions successfully in your predictive analysis. And I will tell you that this class begins December 7th, runs for 4 consecutive Saturdays, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It is recorded via Zoom, so if you can't attend live, don't worry. Right now, the early bird registration rate is still available, which saves you $55 off of tuition, but that ends on November 25th. So if you are on the fence thinking about registering for this class, get in by November 25th if you want that savings. Otherwise, registration will formally end by December 1st. All of my classes are personalized using your birth charts in the learning experience, and every single one of you get to give me a major life event from your past to help augment the learning experience so that you could track your progressions and transits that were happening during that major life event. We're going to learn things like the progressed lunation cycle in this class. We're going to learn how to work with all of the progressed transitions, progressed moon, progressed sun, the angles, and orbs, everything else that you could possibly imagine. So I wanted to show you that. My website is insightfulastrology.com. And by the way, if you haven't already gotten your year ahead forecasts, I encourage you to do that because 2025 is going to be a magnificent, life-changing year. And let me tell you, every sign is going to be affected because of the major astrology. So you can get 2 signs for $28, or you can get all 12 for $95 at the moment. And guess what? These videos are on demand for you right now, and you can have access to them and you can absolutely see what is in store for you. So, okay, thank you for listening to me. And now we're going to talk about progressions. What are progressions? Do you guys have an ephemeris? If you don't, you need one. Okay. Listen, I'm not a fan of using the online ephemeris as your only tool for an ephemeris. If you're going to study astrology with me, you know you need a physical ephemeris. And this will be your friend. You will use it every single day of your life as an astrology student, as an aspiring astrologer. Trust me. I mean, look, this tattered old book proves the point. I cannot go a day without using my ephemeris because not only does it allow you to track transits, but you can actually eyeball secondary progressions from an ephemeris. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in the class. But basically, the method of secondary progressions, it is a day, one day in your ephemeris or in your life will equal 1 year of life in the secondary progressed chart. And so you can take a snapshot, whatever day you were born, and this is a 21st century ephemeris. So I was born in the 20th century, like many of you. You would have to do this with a 20th century ephemeris, but you take the day that you were born, that is 0, and you're going to project forward around 90 years. Let's say, let's be generous and give your lifespan 90 years, and those 90 days after the day you were born are equal to 90 years of life, starting with the day you were born. And when you look at those progressed aspects in both the standalone chart and against your birth chart, this helps you understand when your soul is ready to experience something. And it's kind of eerie Because when you think about it, it absolutely makes you think about fate and how life experiences that we all go through. When you study a topic like progressions, you realize that, oh, wow, maybe there is more to this fate and determinism. And yes, we do have free will. We get to choose how to actualize our circumstances, how to react. We get to choose how to use our energy for sure. But these big major cycles, they have this taste of being fated. And you can really see that in the secondary progressed chart. So what I am going to do is share my screen again and show you my birth chart, and then I'm going to talk about 8 events in my life that occurred that were major milestone events. And you're going to see me demonstrate the secondary progressions against my birth chart and how they were active. And what is in particular relevance for you to pay attention to, the progressed moon is a phenomenal timer because the progressed moon moves the fastest in secondary progressions. And we get to see the progressed moon going around our chart, our entire chart, in about, I may be off here, but about 28 and a half, 29 years or so. That's the secondary progressed moon cycle around your birth chart. Very similar to like a monthly lunation cycle, right? That's 28, 29 days. Secondary progressed cycle is about 28, 29 years. And that means your progressed moon will spend about 2.5 years in a sign, about 2.5 years going through a particular house, sometimes more, depending on the house system that you're using. And I use the Placidus house system for all of my predictive work, unless I'm using a Hellenistic technique. But right now, we're talking about the modern use of predictive techniques. So it's Placidus that I'm going to be using. And the progressed moon is a valuable timer, especially when it contacts an angle in your birth chart or makes a conjunction or an opposition to one of your natal planets. And I am going to show you this in every single example. The progressed sun, your progressed personal planets like Venus or Mercury, even Mars, they also become really important because of how slowly they move. So when they make contact to your birth chart, to the angles in your birth chart, it's a big deal. And in the class, we talk about timing, we talk about orb, we talk about how long each of these particular aspects are going to be relevant in your life. I can't get into all of that in this video. This is just a presentation, more of a, hey guys, this is what secondary progressions are about. Isn't it so cool? Than actually teaching you the techniques. If you want to learn the techniques, you do have to take the class. So uh, the birth chart is referred to as the natal promise, right? We all have this natal promise. Our birth chart cannot be changed for our lifetime. Once we're here, this is what we're working with. This is the energy that we have at our disposal. And that birth chart is woken up at various points in our life, not the whole birth chart. Certain points of it are woken up at various times in our life. And this is when major life events occur that are specific to that particular pattern that might be in our birth chart. And that is one way to look at progressions or transits against a birth chart. And we are going to look at this right now. So let me share my screen and show you. Okay, so this is my birth chart. If you're familiar with me and my channel, you have seen this chart a million times. It's not news. But what I'm going to do is basically take you on a tour of certain life events that were very significant milestones. And I'm going to try to go in order of time, actually. So I'm going to start with the year 1997, and that is the year that I got married. And we're not going to look at the transits. Understand that the rule of three is absolutely in effect and will apply for every major life event. And this is something I teach my predictive astrology students in great depth. I get my students very comfortable with learning how to make accurate ethical predictions as much as possible. Nobody's God. Nobody's going to be right 100% of the time. That's just ridiculous to even think. If you've ever known anybody who's right 100% of the time, please introduce me to that person because that's just not a human being. But the rule of three is a wonderful guideline that I always use in my practice and teach to my students to help affirm that enough is happening in these patterns to really strongly suggest that something's about to pop. So, in these secondary progress chart examples, sometimes you'll see the rule of three fulfilled just in the progressions, but not always. And many times it is a combination of transits, progressions, solar arc directions. So, I'm not going to look at the transits or the solar arcs in this presentation. Otherwise, we'll be here for 3 hours. And I'm not trying to do that. Neither are you. So, we're just looking at progressions here. So, we're going to go to the progressed chart of when I got married in 1997. And hopefully this comes up in order. Yes, beautiful. Okay. So this is a biwheel. If you're not familiar with a biwheel, it is a wheel where the inner wheel is the birth chart. The inner wheel is always the natal birth chart. And sometimes you can have a biwheel, a tri-wheel, a quad wheel. In this case, we're working with a biwheel. And sometimes that biwheel, the outer wheel, sometimes could be transits. But in this case, it is secondary progressions. And we are looking at the secondary progressed chart. So I'm just going to literally go down the list of noteworthy progressions that happened when I got married. So here's the marriage sector, right? We have the seventh house cusp, and the seventh house cusp is ruled by Venus because I have Libra on the seventh house cusp, and Venus is the natural significator of love and marriage for everyone. Lo and behold, the year I got married, my progressed Venus changed signs. That is a monumental time for us. When your progressed Venus changes signs, which will happen three, maybe four times in your lifetime if you live to be really, really, really old beyond 90, it symbolizes a 1 to 2 year period where everything connected to Venus ruled matters will shift for you in a very important way. It's not good or bad. It's just symbolizing the readiness for you to be changing how you work with Venus in your life. In this case, how I was ready was connected to getting married. So progressed Venus changed signs. The progressed moon, which is a magical indicator of timing, was conjunct the seventh house cusp. Now you see I have a natal Uranus here. So Uranus is part of that pattern. It's at 22 degrees when I got married, and Uranus is here at 24, and my descendant is about 2442. And so you can see it's right there. And we typically use a 2 degree orb, excuse me, with progressions. And the progressed moon is a very sensitive timer. And I did get married November 1st of 1997. So the progressed moon was a little bit more than that 2 degree orb, but this is extremely relevant. And also, if my birth time was off by 1 or 2 minutes and I was born a little bit earlier, the progressed moon actually would have been exactly conjunct my descendant. So we're splitting hairs here with the angles, and you want to keep that in mind when you look at the progressed angles and the progressed moon, because unless you know with 1000% accuracy that you're dealing with a perfect birth time, there has to be a little bit of wiggle room there. So this is certainly fitting that the progressed moon is conjunct my seventh house cusp. So that's two indicators. But wait, there's more. Let's look at the secondary progressed sun, which is here at 10 degrees Gemini. Why is that important? Well, the sun is a significator of men, and the progressed sun is exactly opposite my natal moon, which is a significator of women. And the sun moon connections are profoundly accurate when there are major relationship changes that are happening. So this is the progressed sun opposite my natal moon. That's like a full moon energy. a fulfillment, a culmination energy. Extremely, extremely fascinating and important. And so those were the progressions that were active when I got married. Now, let's look to when I gave birth to my children. So we're going to go here, birth of my first child. And here, this is August of 1999, when I gave birth to my son. And my progressions that were active at that point, my progressed ascendant just changed signs. Now, again, the progressed ascendant, progressed angles don't change signs very often. They'll change signs maybe 3 times in your life, maybe. And so it is quite a big deal when that occurs. And the year or two in your life when that does happen, super, super important to look at for changes connected to your identity. And so progressed ascendant change signs, there is another pretty active progression. And it's another full moon kind of an energy, which is interesting. But this time it's with the progressed moon. So here's the progressed moon at Scorpio at 15 degrees, and it is opposite my natal sun. And this is relevant because the uh, progressed moon, it's in my seventh house of marriage and partnership, and it shows how united I was at that point with my husband. And the sun in my chart does rule the fifth house, which is the topic of children. And so here we have a clear demonstration of this progressed moon opposite my natal sun, highlighting the readiness for me to become a mother. Isn't that fascinating? So those were the two progressions that were very active at that time. And now we're going to go to the birth of my second child, my daughter, who came 2 years later, literally exactly 2 years later. I had the same due date with both of my kids. How weird is that? My due date for both of my kids was August 17th. One was born August 10th, and the other was born exactly 2 years later on August 13th. So this is what my chart looked like, my secondary progress chart looked like when I gave birth to my daughter. And, by the way, the moon is a significator for fertility. And look at my natal moon and look at my progressed moon. They match. Do you know what this is called, guys? This is a big cycle that we all have when we're about 27 to 28 years old. It is a progressed new moon. The progressed moon meets with the natal moon. So that means that at this point in my life, I was 27 and a half years old. The progressed moon made a complete revolution around my entire chart and now met up with my natal moon. So that can actually happen 27 and a half years to 28 and a half years of your life. And it will happen for all of us. So here I am now emotionally aligned, ready for this big emotional new beginning. And it is giving birth to my daughter. And I thought that was very, very interesting that that progression was active at that time. So for her, that is the main progression. The transits really told pretty much the rest of the story. Interesting to note is that my progressed sun here at 13 and a half Gemini was exactly conjunct transiting Saturn at the time that she was born. And that's interesting because my progressed sun was, you can look at progressions to transits. I don't do that too often, but I notice when there are those connections. And that means obviously my daughter's natal Saturn is conjunct my progressed sun at that time. So that's pretty interesting. All right, now let's move on. And I hope that hope this is connecting dots for you. I hope you guys are finding this interesting and that it is a valuable learning tool and it inspires you to learn more about progressions. So now let's go to my divorce. This divorce didn't happen until 2011. And by the time I got divorced, it was after a 4-year divorce battle. many, many court appearances, a trial. It was a very difficult time in my life. So by the time this divorce finalized, this literally was the day that I walked into court, and the judge was so fed up with the case, he locked us in the courtroom and said, "You guys are not leaving until you're divorced." He literally said that. He was over it, and I think he was getting ready to retire, and he wasn't about to have, another judge have to deal with the case. And he said to us, "You're not leaving today until you're divorced." And so it's pretty funny looking back on it, because that also was the day that Uranus changed signs. And I think that was so funny that Uranus went into Aries that day. But anyway, I'm digressing. So the progressions that were active, look at the progressed moon, conjunct my natal Venus. Venus is the ruler of my seventh house. Guys, that's pretty literal, right? And what is that progressed moon doing? It's waking up my natal Venus Pluto opposition, the incredible power struggles that we were having for the divorce, the fighting, all of that. He was just like, he progressed the moon in the 12th house. He locked us in the courtroom symbolically. I mean, I'm sure we could have left by the end of the day, but that's what he said. So I think that's so funny. Uh, Progressed moon, conjunct Venus. And that was good for me because I was ready to be done with this marriage by then. And what was also happening was a major progression. Guys, when you get this progression, pay attention to it. Progressed Sun conjunct Venus or progressed Venus conjunct Sun is a huge time in our life. And it is usually quite fortunate. And for me, this was connected to my divorce and being able to move forward in my life. That was an incredible time. So that progression was there. And again, Venus rules my seventh house of marriage. This was all about marriage and relationship energy and getting my identity and my life back. And the other progressed aspect that was interesting is that progressed Mercury is conjunct my fourth house cusp here. You see that? And that was very significant because of the terms of the divorce and the house situation, the living situation, the family situation. That was quite significant, I have to say. So there is the evolution of marriage, having children, and divorce. Now, in the midst of, oh, and by the way, one more progression I just noticed, progress Mars, which is the ruler of my chart because I have Aries rising, is making a trine to Venus. So you see, the rule of three was absolutely fulfilled here for me being ready for this new stage in my life. And that included the end of my marriage at that time. Now, let's actually backtrack and go back in time because while I was married, I fell in love with astrology. After I had my second child, this is when I fell in love with astrology. And I knew that I wanted to do this work. At the time, it was more of a hobby than a career requirement. But after my ex-husband left, I needed to figure out a way to make money. Was I going to do this? Was I going to try to make it into a profitable business? Or was I going to go back to school and get a master's degree and be a counselor? That was, what I was on track to do, is to be a psychologist. I felt that astrology was my calling by then. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this. But before that all happened, I fell in love with astrology and I went to my first certification program. This is the progressed chart for when I graduated that first certification program. And this was in 2004. So look at this. This is dynamite, guys. Progressed moon. Here we go. Look at that progressed moon. Exactly conjunct my midheaven, my natal midheaven. If that doesn't demonstrate that I was ready to embrace my life's work, my calling in life. Guys, this was almost 21 years ago. This is incredible that this is when I graduated from that first certification course. And I was able to call myself an astrologer. Pretty cool, right? Another major progressed aspect was happening, and that is my progressed Mercury was conjunct Mars in my third house of communication testing. And Mars, again, is my chart ruler. This is my identity. That was incredible because it gave me the mental energy, the sharpness, the desire, the motivation to embrace astrology and to learn it in a very diligent, focused way. And there is a smaller progression here. Progressive Venus is actually making a sextile to my natal Mars. It's opening up. It's not quite there yet, but it's on its way. And the reason why that's relevant, so in another few months, I would say another 6 months or so, this is going to really be within orb. And the reason why that's interesting is because Venus is also the ruler of my second house of earned income. And it was a few months after this that I started taking money as an astrologer, doing astrology writing or starting to talk to people in a limited way. I didn't have to work full time, so it was still considered more of a hobby, but I was able to start making money as an astrologer at that point. Very, very interesting. Now, pay attention to something. My progressed Mars is changing signs here. That's my chart ruler. And when your chart ruler is changing signs, if that happens in your lifetime, it doesn't happen for everybody. It depends on what your rising sign's ruler is. But if your rising sign is ruled by a fast moving planet, if it's ruled by obviously, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, it's going to change signs in your lifetime once, at least twice, three times, maybe more, especially if you're Cancer rising. And that symbolizes a big, big turning point for you in your life. And this is interesting because it was at the 29th degree of Cancer. And these were the years that I was wrapping up, actually being that stay at home mother and having that role. And when my progressed Mars went into Leo, that is when things really started to shift for me. And my ex husband left. And so the men in my life started to change. And I started to become more prominent and in the spotlight as an astrologer. And this is very consistent with the Leo energy. And that brings me to my next example, which is, some of you guys who have been following me for a very long time, you know this, but many of you on this channel have no idea that this is the history of me as an astrologer. And so I will tell you the story that once my ex decided he wanted a divorce and I was building my career as an astrologer, that was around 2008 into 2009. And YouTube was pretty new back then. I think YouTube was launched in 2006, if I'm remembering right. My YouTube channel launched in 2008. And that was also when this brand new concept called video horoscopes was invented. And for you guys, it seems very commonplace, right? You just literally can pop an astrology video up everywhere, any social media platform, YouTube, anywhere. Well, it was brand new when I was starting out as an astrologer, and I was actually a pioneer in this field. I was one of the first astrologers to create video horoscopes. And so first I was hired as a writer to write video horoscopes for other people. And then I'm not going to tell the whole story here because it's a long story, but I ended up getting a syndication deal with Tarot.com, which at that time was an extremely popular website, and it still is. It's part of a big conglomerate. It's a publicly traded company. It is a big deal, and I became the face of video horoscopes for many years on Tarot.com. And they syndicated my videos, and the Insightful Astrology weekly horoscopes were born, and they were professionally filmed. It was a whole thing. And that is what truly, truly launched my career. And here is the chart for when the videos were launched. No, that's the wrong chart. Hang on. We're gonna here. Okay. So this is an approximate date because I couldn't remember the exact date, but I do recall that we were filming these videos in 2008, and then they were picked up for syndication. So they were on my YouTube channel in 2008 for a few months, and then they were picked up and syndicated. And the professional filming of them and the release into Toro.com, it happened at some point in January of 2009. And it might have been, was it 2000? I'm getting a little fuzzy now with the exact dates, but let me actually look at my ephemeris. All right, you know what? We're going to skip that example because I actually think I have the date wrong on that. So hold, please. And what I'm going to do is move on to my mother's death, and then we're going to come back to that one. I'm going to double check the date. So look at the progress chart for my mother's death, which, no, we did that. We did the studying astrology. Um, this would be January of 2016. This is when my mother passed away. So now I'm skipping forward a little bit, but I'll go back to that time if I can remember the date. I think might have been 2010, actually. I have to double check. So here, the progressions that were active when my mother passed away, this is interesting. Um, I'm going to tell you, this is actually very interesting. Why is such a nice progression happening when my mother passed away? Progressed Venus is conjunct my natal Mercury. Well, what's interesting is that when my mother passed away, again, this is a whole other video. I cannot even begin to tell you the after death communication and the signs and the powerful, powerful signs that she sent me. We agreed to this before she died, and she came through with all of them in very specific ways. She made it very clear to me that she knew she was going to pass. She actually laid out her funeral clothes the day that she died, and 2 years before that, she showed me what her funeral outfit was. So many things that I can't get into with signs after she passed. And so I think that progression symbolizes this. It symbolizes the somewhat ease and peace that I had with the grief of losing my mother because she was still in contact in a very strong way. So that's something interesting. Now, the moon is mother, and look at my progressed moon and notice how it is exactly opposite my natal moon. That's pretty specific, right? And the moon is in my eighth house of death, and the moon does rule my fourth house of mom. And it's just pretty interesting. So I think that's it for the progressions that were active when my mom passed away. The transits happening were, transiting Neptune square my moon, transiting Saturn conjunct my moon, transiting Pluto on my midheaven. So that was happening simultaneously. But you can see how the progressions are just so relevant and so amazing, so amazingly important. And I don't think you can see this, what I'm doing right now on the screen, but I'm actually changing the progressions and I'm looking at the progress chart for the date that I believe might have been more connected to when the videos were launched. So I apologize. I'm going to correct that right now for you. So let's look at this. This is when. So the other chart that I was telling you about in 2009, we were filming videos. We made the deal, right? The deal was made, but they weren't launched until 2000. I think it was 2010. I do. And the reason why I think it was 2010 is because I'm remembering very clearly that these videos were launched on tarot.com when Mars was retrograde in Leo the last time. And so that's how I just double checked it in my ephemeris. And sure enough, that was January of 2010. So I'm not remembering the exact date. I just arbitrarily put January 1st, but understand that in 2009, we would have been filming them. And 2010 is when the release happened. So here's the release. And look at the secondary progressed aspects that were happening. And here we have, look at my progressed ascendant. It's 11 degrees 45 minutes. What does that mean? That means my natal moon would have been conjunct my progressed seventh house cusp. Seventh house and the moon together, this is the public. And this became a very public thing. It was syndicated and it became extremely popular, and it basically launched my career in a major way. So the fact that they were launched with the progressed ascendant opposite natal moon, very, very significant. The other major energy here is that we have progressed Mercury. You see progressed Mercury here at 12 degrees 44 minutes. What is it doing? Well, it's making an exact trine to natal Jupiter, which is incredible, ruling my ninth house of broadcasting. And Mercury is communication. And that trine, very, very favorable. It ended up being, this trine was active for many, many, many years because Mercury later went retrograde. I actually think it's still in effect, this trine for me. And you're going to see this trine when I show you how I bought my house, how it was in effect also. Very powerful. But Mercury that year was trine Jupiter, and that's very symbolic of a favorable major communications related project. And progressed Venus is separating. Okay, so just to be clear, it's not exact anymore. It is separating from a sextile, from a trine to my midheaven. And that is success and money. But the year before, so the original year before, 2009, it was exact. And that is when everything came together and the success really started for me. And I also launched 2 astrology reports, which are still being published today. So that was happening. And you can just see one more energy, progressed midheaven, is here at 17 degrees. And my natal sun is exactly square the progressed midheaven. And the sun rules my 5th house of creative self-expression. So those were the active progressions. Truly, truly phenomenal. And I have to say, the secondary progress chart never disappoints me. It is, you need to track it in your life. If you don't know how to track it, take my class. You will learn how to do this. You will be amazed. If you do know how to work with progressions, but you've never taken the time to do this for yourself, it is a wonderful exercise to do. Find the major life events, track your secondary progress chart, look at the connections. That symbolizes your internal readiness for this to happen, and it's going to pop. It's going to pop when the secondary progress chart matches up to your natal chart and when transits or solar arc directions are there to support it. So thank you for sticking around with me and watching this pretty long presentation. I hope that it was valuable and that you learned something and that it inspires you to look deeper at your secondary progressions. And if I could ever help you in the future, either as your instructor or through a personal consultation, just go to insightfulastrology.com and we'll be talking very soon. All right, guys, take care. Bye.